Hi, it's Chris with Implied Music. How do we write good chromatic melodies? Chromatic, all the colors, all the notes of the scale. Most melodies, stick to the diatonic 7-tone scales, but it's possible to learn a few tricks to write melodies that have exciting, engaging, dissonant notes in them that will propel the melody, make it more interesting, more memorable. Well, let's take a look at that today. I got an interesting comment last week. It went something like this. I can't find it, so I'm going to have to paraphrase. One day I'll be able to use chromatic tones in my melodies. And I thought, well, that one day is now if you know a couple of simple tricks. So I want to talk about how chromatic notes, notes that might feel dissonant or outside the scale or outside the chord system that you're working with, can be brought into your melodies in order to make them more engaging, more interesting, and fun. There's really only a few approaches that will be consistently successful, and they're fairly easy to demonstrate. Listen to this. I'm in the key of C, and this is a simple 1-6-2-5. That was a jazz example, and I used all 12 tones. Then there's something like this. It's a tone row, all 12 notes. If I was a Viennese composer in the early 20th century, I'd do that. And then there's this kind of like ballet concept as well. Here you can really hear how the chromatic notes create propulsion and a leaning feeling. A little hokey, but I was a ballet accompanist for many years. So listen, if this is the second or third video of mine you've seen and you're getting something out of it and you're not subscribed, now's the time to subscribe to the channel. We're trying to build a community of composers, producers who are interested in learning more about music theory in order to support their own composition, their own work. I hope this is music theory for everyone. Let me do a little review real quickly here. Now, in any given scale, that's the C major scale, you'll find 7 tones. The C happens again up at the top. And what I've discovered with my students, with my youngest students, is their ear is actually a little more engaged with only 5 of those notes. And it's the predictable 5, what we call the pentatonic scale. If I play all those notes at once, and you look down at the keyboard, you can see that I've actually avoided this half step from happening and this half step from happening. A pentatonic scale is the C major scale in this case, with the tritone from the scale thrown away. That actually is one of the most common scales across the globe, what my teacher used to call a pan-cultural scale. And it's always going to be successful for melodies, but it's always going to be a little boring. The diatonic scale that we use today includes a half step here and a half step there. And both of those half steps are hints to how we can create even more interesting chromatic notes. The first half step that happens between the F and the E implies something really important, which is that every sort of half step that's away from a chord tone wants to go to the chord tone. You hear how I'm playing a C chord and the F wants to fall to the E. I'm not exactly sure that's a leading tone. It's more of a resolution. But up at the top, that B up to the C is a leading tone. That half-step resolution and that leading tone gives me all kinds of great approaches to creating melodies that use chromatic non-diatonic tones here. As an example, we'll take a simple chord progression, C to A minor, and we'll start with a pentatonic scale, and we'll build outwards from there. Well, if I add some half steps to that, like the F and the B, I can get a little more interesting qualities. That lean from the B, that sort of tilt downwards from the F. Now, chromatic tones, half step below a chord tone, maybe a passing tone, half step above, will give me much more interesting things. So let's try that. There were a lot of weird chromatic tones in there if you look at it, and I was just kind of improvising, letting my ear sort of flow. The passing tones, chromatic passing tones, are tense for a moment, but then they sink to a place which is solid. These extra notes can be thought of as embellishments, decorations to a fundamental melody, but they have the quality of really creating energy. Embellishments is a whole study in melody, and we could analyze these as neighbor tones, as appoggiatures, as escape tones. And yet, I think that your ear can gradually kind of begin to build in these conceptions. It's clear to me, and I've, like I said, done this with young students again and again, that as you develop your melodic ear, you've got to begin where you are. You must begin with something that you can easily sing, easily hear. And for a lot of people, that means the pentatonic scale. There's that famous Bobby McFerrin example of him jumping along a scale to the left and the right, getting people to sing notes. And of course, Jacob Collier wouldn't be able to do what he does with those big crowds if we didn't understand intuitively the directions of notes and melodies and how things like that work. Of course, Collier's audiences are pretty savvy, aren't they? But I think everyone knows the pentatonic scale, either the major one or the minor pentatonic scales, the same notes. I'm just starting in a different place. Now, when I was a 13-year-old, I discovered that I could keep a steady bass line and melodicize along that pentatonic scale. And everything would sound good. And the first thing that I started to add to it, of course, was the blue note. That lean is a tip-off to us. The lean from the blue note up or as a passing tone down. Do you want to add chromatic tones to your melodies, even major ones? Think about the way the blue note works in the pentatonic scale. All all those chromatic tones are basically leveraging the same idea that the blue note uses. I can't really bend a note on the piano, but I'm leaning in, I'm passing through a chromatic tone that sort of creates a momentary, dissonance, tension. All melody is built on the idea of tension and resolution, or my teacher used to say, anticipation and then fulfillment. And as an artist, you're going to be playing with how much you fulfill the anticipation. Are you going to give the listener exactly what they expect? Are you going to delay gratification melodically? Are you going to use more passing tones or go to a surprising dissonant tone, which only later resolves? Creating good melodies and creating propulsion, especially in your epic melodies and scoring melodies, has a lot to do with the balancing act, the delicate give and take of anticipation and fulfillment, of creating a sense of expectation and then, either delivering or not. It's eventually easy to use chromatic tones in your melody. Now, all this has been tonal, except for that one little 12-tone row example I showed at the beginning. If you want to just let a bunch of raccoons loose in your piano, you're going to get chromatic 12-tone music, but it's not terribly organized, is it? And especially if you're working in a scoring situation where you're actually manipulating the emotional energy of a melody, chromatic tones add nuance, color, flair to what can sometimes, if you just use pentatonics or even diatonic melody, it can be a little bit soft, right? You want to go a little bit harder. You want to push a little bit more. You want to wring that towel and get even more liquid out of it. Try finding chromatic tones, passing tones, appoggiatures, lower neighbors, leading tones. I'm going to stop talking. Try it. It's super fun. All right. I hope this has been useful. Like and subscribe. Ding the bell. You'll be notified when I do my videos. I'll see you next time.